So can I just start off by introducing Helen? This is Helen's website, Chinadvisor, where she does on retainers of some companies, otherwise on one-off engagements for helping Western companies and Chinese companies work with each other. Also does training courses and does in-house corporate training as well. And Helen and I have started, we're up to episode 9 now of a podcast based on Helen's book, it's called Think More Like Chinese. We call the podcast Inside the Chinese Mind, and it's about some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today, but how to work cross-culturally between Chinese and Western cultures. And the basis of where we work from is there's a great divide particularly between the what I call reactive or the Chinese cultures and the Western cultures. And the idea is to build the bridge across that divide. That's what we're doing today. Our principle we talk about is if you can go 40% of the way, if you can help the other side go 40% of the way as well, the last 20% doesn't matter, you can jump that. So that's the best way we can find of finding a way of developing skills internally to make it work. The new China. I wanted to talk a little about this just so we all understand what is China today. So China, obviously, we very much know China in the past, when it was a pre-commercial, back in the 1950s, the Mao Zedong era when it commenced, became a commercial and industrial nation where there was cheap labour, etc. I'm going to do it fairly shortly, if that's okay, so we can get to things.
Yeah, sure.
But today, China is a very different country. It is a country of knowledge and innovation as opposed to being cheap labour. In fact, I was with clients actually about a year ago, and they were showing me through the new office in Beijing, and they had some lovely dark wood furniture everywhere. And I said, "Oh, this is great. Did you get the furniture made here?" And the reply was, "Oh no, it's too expensive to get furniture made here. We get them made in Africa." That's where the cheap labour is going. What's happened to China? China is still an economy that is expanding at a rapid rate. You compare that with India and how far ahead China is against India in development and in GDP, etc. That's some of the benefits of communist capitalism because of the controlled economy. But it also is because of the fact of how business operates in a faster, changing, much easier to change operation, which we'll get to. What is different in China and what has happened with China? If you ever look at the first box up here, I'm sorry it's so hard to read. If you look at that red line going up there, this is a graph of the graduates in science or engineering per year. The red line is China. Blue line here, I think, is USA, Japan, that's Japan, sorry, USA, and Australia is down here. China produces more engineers and scientists every year than the rest of the world combined. Couple that with the increasing line here is China. China's now the second highest in dollar amounts, US dollars, of expenditure on R&D. So couple ability with money, you get the result of this is an example of two things. One, in the electric vehicle industry, China has more electric vehicles than the rest of the world combined and is increasing its electric vehicle production and existence faster than the rest of the world combined. The second is, if you're looking at, and it's hard to read, I'll get you a better picture with this, but with listed companies that are in innovation areas, China is only second to the US in having listed companies in that area. And in the area of the unicorns, the billion-dollar startups, China is also number 2 after the US. So for every company you have, like Facebook in China, Facebook in the US or the Western world, you have WeChat, right? For Amazon, you have, what are the two? Alibaba and
Tencent.
Yeah, Tencent, yeah, etc. So there's a whole bunch of these other companies that are just as large, if not larger, in China. So China is very much now a place that has replaced Silicon Valley. Other people say it's going to. I suggest it already has replaced it. So it's a place of innovation. So what does China want to do with that innovation? It tends to now want to push more and more dollars out to investment into the West. We're finding an increased flow of dollars, which I'll show you shortly, into the West. Why are they investing in the West? These are some of the reasons that they don't have in China that we have here. So we're looking for sorting for difference here. China has a stable government. Is it stable? It is, but it's constantly changing. So business is not stable. There's different, because it's evolving all the time, the way you do business in China is evolving all the time. Where here, you have a stable system, and the system in Western countries is based upon individualism as opposed to collectivism. So much of our laws are about protection of the individual. Criminal law is about protection of the individual person. Property law is about protection of the property. So we have a system that actually is based on protection of individual wealth. Now that's a difference to China. We have it in a clean environment. We have a growing population in some areas in the West, which is still a growing market for them. And generally, particularly for Australia, they see us as being safe from world issues because we don't have any borders. So if you're living in, say, Mongolia, and say you're the president of Mongolia, every morning before 11 a.m., you've got to pick up the phone to the Russian president and say, are you still happy with me today? Right, because that's your entire northern border. And to pick up your phone to Xi Jinping and say, are you happy with me today? Because that's your entire southern border. So if you want to export anything out of Mongolia, you've got to have one friend, if not two. Very much in Australia, we are safe from the world issues. So Australia is a good place to do some investments. Equally, Australia is seen as a place for bringing out new innovations, trialling them on a small Western market like Australia, and make the mistakes here before you go and invest in Europe or USA and developing your markets for new innovations. What are they investing in? As we know, the Chinese have traditionally invested in energy and mining. But have a look how this has changed since 2014 over here. The main areas are internet, property, finance, chemicals on top of mining and oil and gas, etc. But the areas in which China is now investing throughout the world has increased rapidly since 2014. And that is to take the innovations they're developing in China out into the Western markets.
So is that global?
That's global. Yeah, that's global, sorry. Yeah. They're developing new ways of learning, right? For example, in 2010, I would have to speak Chinese in China. The only place I have to speak Chinese now in China is in the South Beijing railway station if I want to catch a fast train out from there. Because so the level of English in China has increased rapidly. The level of understanding of how to do things around the world has increased rapidly. Notwithstanding that, we'll still go through the cultural differences because they're still inbuilt in each of us and make a world of difference of how to operate. But the reason for this increase is because of the innovation of China being an innovation nation and now wanting to export the IP that they've developed, or the DNA sampling machines, for example, with BGI, and taking them out to new markets in the West. So we're finding China's investing in almost every area these days.
Thank you, Darren. I just want to go back quickly to one slide there that you showed. This one to partly answer the question. My answer is actually also, if you notice, China is growing. China has been growing rapidly, but the change has only happened in the last 20 years, really. So the significant growth and the education of the local Chinese people of how to operate commercially in the commercial sense has only started about 20 years ago. Before that, China is a closed, controlled economy. The whole China was run as a big SOE. So that perhaps explains a lot of the people you're dealing with or working with, their commercial knowledge and how they communicate and where they come from. It's unlike you. You've been in this industry or in your field. You've been accumulating your knowledge, experience for all this time, where the Chinese has only had this amount of time. So huge amount of change. The building you showed, Darren, a few slides up, the CCTV tower.
Yes.
This place before, when I was in university, was a village, farmland. People said, where are you going? You say, oh, if you're going to that place, they call that the suburbs. What's the equivalent here in Brisbane? It's somewhere nobody wants to go and live. So the government said, well, okay, well, let's pick a bit of land, which is empty, which is easy to plan, let's make that place Guomao. So now that entire, you have all been to Beijing. You saw how, just visualize that. That place in the 1980s to 1990s is just land.